people to join this event. I'm not sure whether someone came from the hall downstairs. I would like to make a brief introduction before I pass the floor to Victor, who will moderate the following discussion. Events like this one cannot be organized in a day or even in a month. Of course, it takes time to agree on the topic of the discussion, to find the premises, approximately clarify how the interaction will unfold. But in addition to that, when we're speaking about so complicated events, focused on so complicated circumstances, we need to take into account the period we are going through. So I hope that we will manage to make this event interesting for the participants and for the audience, and I'm grateful to all those who have joined this event offline. The format of this event will be quite complicated. There will be several components, so as you'll see, first we will hear speeches from the participants, then we will proceed to moderated discussion moderated by Viktor Ruban, and then hopefully we will have interactive part, interaction with the audience, again moderated by Viktor Ruban. We will rely on him. Denis Blushchinsky designed this format. When we met for the first time, I outlined briefly how I imagined this event, and he added a lot of details to it and finalized the format, and hopefully we will have no or as least as possible of self-censorship. So the floor to Mr. Victor. Thank you, Mykola. Actually, I've already done my job because I've designed the framework of this event, and Mykola just explained it. But I'd like to add that the topic is difficult and even provocative, and it is also quite a broad topic. And the speakers who will participate in this discussion are known to you. They do not even require a separate introduction. They are quite active in public area, at least they're active on their social media. They freely express their positions and views, and they have quite diverging positions, which is great actually, because the event and the discussion can start if the positions are different. We will try and make use of the form, the shape of this space, and hopefully it will contribute to the discussion. I realize that to some extent you are the viewers, and you might want to just listen from the side, especially after such a long day. You might be tired, but please participate in this discussion. We will have a part where we will be able to interact with the audience. We will have at least half an hour of discussion with you. So if you feel that you have something to add at a certain point, please remember that question you might have or comment and ask it later. Feel free to express all of your comments later. What else, Mykola? I will need you to start the event, we will have a part with keynote speeches. And so first we will have Denis, then Natalia, then Nicola, then Olha speaking. It will take up to 10 minutes. And after that, we will start a dialogue or monologue. Could you please introduce yourself, because you are so active in many areas that it might be hard to do for myself. Thank you. The strongest have stayed, those who are the most resilient have stayed. You probably have a lot of coffee in your veins, but I'm really happy with the level of this forum. I just wrote it that unfortunately we do not often get to participate in such cultural professional forums, and quite often such forums are organized in a different way, but I'm happy that this event is an exception. It gathers professionals who can share their thoughts. My name is Denis Beshchinsky. I'm a musician, a public activist, scientist, someone interested in the matters of culture and civil society development. I see it as my mission to organize such projects that support humanity in our reality. I would like to introduce myself in a different way, actually. For example, like this. Good evening. My name is Denis Beshchinsky. I am someone who is very honest and possesses dignity. I am someone who is a believer, who loves people and acts as the best person can act. Probably after these introductory remarks, you maybe wouldn't respond to me that I'm crazy, but you might think it. So, when I choose to make such an introduction, it shows a certain dimension of my inner world, which should not be communicated if you are a reasonable person. On the other hand, I could also talk to you about very important things, and later in the evening I could say, listen, I really loved how it went. Should we create a club of those who respect time frames? We will be the best, the coolest people who will never be late, maybe except for you, lady, just because we love starting everything on time and ending everything on time. And our next meeting will be on Thursday at 6 p.m. You will come at 6 p.m. here, maybe even a bit earlier, and I will come here at 6:35. I will say, excuse me, dear friends, usually I never come late, but it's an exception today. We could imagine such a situation, and it would be even more natural than the one I described in the beginning. Why? Because it comes down to cultural patterns. We can call them values. We can say that, yes, we might be always on time. We might declare some things, but not always follow them. And saying something without sticking to it is one thing, but when you are declaring that you are someone with dignity and then you do not act on it, it's a different thing. We cannot and should not voice it. But who should? Those who are around us, the environment, which sees what we do, who we are, and so the environment will be ready to say that yes, this person who was just here, who did something, is probably someone who values certain things and has dignity, and so we might be ready to give the assessment of specific deeds, specific acts. And that's what I would like to discuss for the next few minutes of my speech. When we look at a certain informational space we're in, together with European cultural activists and politicians, we often get an impression that we speak in different languages. And the question is, why so? Because my personal experience from Estonia, Germany, Italy, Belgium, and other countries I visited virtually or in person over the years shows that we might use the same words, but we end up telling different stories. And when we first thought about it, and when we started reflecting on different meanings in different language systems, we noticed this global difference, which was reflected in the first part of my presentation. I was trying to make an introduction using the language of values and then using the language of virtues. Virtues are muscles which allow us to practice what we believe in. And as we are engaged in this practice in the everyday situations, we do not often face challenges. We just do ordinary things like making a tea, but sometimes critical situations happen, and we have to take an important and difficult decisions to be someone in a specific situation. That's how we sometimes have to choose whether to remain a human being or not. And we chose quite a difficult motto for ourselves that we selected back in 2022. It explains what our heroic deeds signify for the whole world. So it's about the capacity to remain human beings under any circumstances, and this motto gave us a lot, and it helped us to communicate the Ukrainian strength and difference in the European context with this choice to remain a person, a human being, irrespective of the circumstances. Is about the virtues. It's about the things that you seemingly cannot do, but still you do that. No matter what circumstances surround you, you just keep living and existing as a human being. And I'm now thinking about the volunteers, the infantry servicemen, about the combat medics who do things that healthy people outside of the war reality could never imagine, but they still do that. And we might talk about this difference with European system without opposing our reality and the European one. We can say that in Europe, the language of virtues got dissolved in certain institutional dimensions. They have institutions, policies, laws, standards, and this language of virtues require this impetus we have in Ukraine. And as we Ukrainians collapse every moment, we can contribute this impetus to Europe through the practice of personal choices we are forced to make. And finally, I would like to compare values, European ones, but not only, to the mirrors. They reflect what a culture is full of. But for the mirrors to reflect, there has to be a source, a flame, which will give something to reflect. Because we need to preserve it and bring it to Europe. And that's how we will participate in the general discourse of European values. Thank you. Denis, please do not leave us. Stay right here, join us. All right, I will pass the flame, like during the Olympics, to the next speaker, Ms. Natalia. Please, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, dear participants. My name is Natalia Kryvda. I am professor of Kyiv National Taras Shevchenko University. Are there any graduates or students of this university? Shevchenko University, great. I am happy to see you. We are actually in the same boat. We are all in the same boat. We all citizens of Ukraine. We are among this turbulent ocean, and Denis and I often get invitations to different events. Obviously, people try to oppose our views. I say that values are the most important things, and values are practiced. And Denis says that values are no longer relevant. They are not important anymore, but the virtues are important now. But it seems to me that we mean the same. The values are transformed, translated into practices that at individual level can be called virtues.
I believe Ukraine has won. I am convinced about this. We have won the battle of senses because, of course, conventional war will continue. Information war is no longer there because remember what happened yesterday? The events. Can you tell me what happened yesterday? Please work with me. You are not here for fun. I mean in worldwide or Ukraine. Okay, how about the day before yesterday? How about 2 days ago? It's not about information. It's about senses. Today, we are within semantic war. Ukraine has won on this battlefield, and this is our main victory. Yes, with at the cost of thousands of lives, we have shown that the rule of law, democracy are the practices of our everyday existence. This is a professional audience. The Lisbon Agreement of 2009 basically created the exoskeleton of European identity. Are you aware that there is also a Ukrainian list? Is there a Ukrainian list of values which is enshrined in the law? Constitution is a document. What values are listed? Please, please go on. You're smart. Freedom, yes, except it's not on the list. Dignity, yes, I agree, it is on our list of Ukrainian values. No, no, you'll be surprised, but no. We have a document. I don't want to offend anyone, but we are professionals, called the Law on the National Identity. And there are 4 values on this law who decided that they are values of our life. First is unity, second, identity, third, freedom, and dignity is number 4. I'm not ready to join these, but as far as European values is concerned, making it a trampoline for us, I am ready to join. Denis was frank about saying that we want to come to Ukraine with something, but we are Europe. We don't need to go anywhere. We could join a political union, but we are Europe. From the standpoint of values, practices, everyday culture, and I really want this to be part of our self-realization. Now, 6 pages of text, but you only have 5 minutes left. What is the most powerful role of culture? I don't instrumentalize it, but I'd like to talk about the role of culture, which will be important during rehabilitation and now during the war. First of all, culture creates the system of values. It is the framework of ensuring post-war human-centric existence in Ukraine. Through humans, we measure successes, form strategy, use tools through rethinking of a traumatic experience. I'm sure identity will grow out of pragmatic experience. We are all there because we all have traumas, but this is a way of realizing yourself. Locality, but only at the forefront of globalism. We do not lose ourselves and become as part of our more intellectual framework. We use experience of prior heritage and prior generations. As an expert, I think we can work with this. Culture is a source of creative source and search for effectiveness under conditions of limited resources and capital. The most challenging being human capital. How do you achieve something when we are short of people, or people are the wrong sort? Also, culture is about education. It's also about forming competitiveness, and I'm not aware of any other way of. Oftentimes, creative practices become city building, community building, nucleus. And if we believe that culture is the foundation of our identity, culture becomes of this nucleus of self-charging of community. Finally, culture as a broad inclusiveness, broad and fair, not humiliating, but decent from the terms national, ethnic identity or religious identity, etc. 2 minutes left. Okay. The last thesis that I've been thinking of, and I suggest you think about this too, it's more of a question. In 2013, we signed a very good theoretical document, Hangzhou Declaration. You've probably heard of this. The first item on this document, and we signed it, by the way, starting from 2013, culture should be included in all programs of strategic development. Culture will define the content of strategy of development of states. I would like to urge you to think about what will become the nucleus of rebuilding Ukraine after victory. I believe culture will define the direction of rehabilitation and our future movement. Are we sure we want to rebuild Azovstal? Did we ever discuss this as society? Are we sure we want to rebuild schools in Liman, Kherson, as they were? Did we discuss this? Are we sure we want to return museum collections to the same buildings where they were housed in the past? Are we sure about that? Perhaps we should first have a broad polylogue, and only within experts, but also involving other cultural development stakeholders, which is basically the whole society or communities, and it even includes our neighbors. So the last phrase, thinking about future, identifying the role, place, and functions of culture, and in doing so, I think we should develop and prepare this polylogue and define the way, direction of our future creation of a brand new country. Thank you. Please join us.
Я розумію, що зараз розмова звучить доволі широко, так?
I realize that so far we've been talking at a very broad context. Positions are fairly different. I think we're talking about the same thing, only using different language. Right now, this part is to set the stage for the sort of general information context, from which we will try to weave some sort of necklace. It's going to be a special case for me. I will play a role of a student, and I will try to use my speech because I will try to cram everything within 10 minutes. European values is a localized historical phenomenon which has intention and potential for globalization and certain unification in specific cultural documents. They are EU documents. This phenomenon has a deep intellectual and contextual nature and is internally coherent. European values are, to a degree, doctrines and ideology. Culture is a third category that I am going to talk about. Is a means of interhuman communication where an integral component is individual or collective self-expression or conscious and creative perception of this self-expression. In this specific communication, sometimes or always, we have articulation, promotion, and transaction of senses. This communication is done through cultural practices. I believe it's a way of interhuman communication, and the method of communication is basically cultural practices. Now, cultural practices are collective acts containing elements of creative self-expression aimed at production or consumption of cultural products. So it's either creation or co-creation, consumption or co-consumption. Also, a fair statement would be is that creation or co-creation of cultural products is more effective from the standpoint of articulation of senses if it is voluntary and not voluntary. In other words, voluntary nature in the cultural practice is important in the context of the aforementioned articulation. So senses circulate best when they are based on voluntary principle. In other words, we're creating what's important and we consume what is relevant to us. Participation in cultural practice can be voluntary only when it meets subjective requirements, and these requirements depend on situational, internal determinants of participants of cultural practices. In other words, only when an individual, either himself or jointly with others, creates or consumes cultural product, do you have cultural communications. Conditions of this voluntary nature is the need, intention, and being self-relevant. In other words, what I need right now. Under modern conditions, we observe a wide diversity of these needs due to high degree of diversity and individualized nature of participants of society who are individual subjects of perception as well as decision-making. Diversity is the last third category that I am appealing to. Is about acceptance difference as a consequence of freedom, which is the source and condition for dignity. Diversity is not exactly a value, but it integrates many other values, including the Lisbon Convention. So diversity is about respect for others and their choices. which stems from self-respect and asserting your own right for temporary situational choice. Freedom, human rights, and other values, according to Lisbon values, are confirmed by practices that are in sync with diversity. Cultural practices that assert diversity can serve the goal that is much higher than protection of identity. Promotion of other methods or way of life and entertainment or leisure. In my personal experience, I came to the conclusion of the past several years what culture can affect, and this is probably its largest, biggest ambition. I will come up with my conclusion right now. Culture, which is based on diversity, can achieve peaceful coexistence of different individuals, social groups, regions, countries, and continents. This is the biggest possible achievement, peaceful coexistence. Thank you.
І це справді, нам не обов'язково всі 10 хвилин якось застосовувати, можна закінчити трошки.
Indeed, you don't have to use up all of your 10 minutes. You feel free to finish early, if you like. Okay. I need to time my presentation. So I'm starting the stop clock. Good evening, I'm Olga Dyatlov. In the previous discussion, I thought this is very dynamic, very interesting. My notes are rather different. I am the co-founder and governing funder of Other Education from the agency which unites cultural and educational organizations. I always identified myself as a practitioner, and I'm also a producer in independent performance arts. I believe that culture defines what we are and what we could become. I know that it's not just about art, heritage, way of existing together, acting together. Sometimes, for example, you watch what happens on the road, what the traffic is like, and you feel it's part of our culture. I was born in Crimea. I lived there until 2014, and that place symbolizes diversity. Then I moved to Ivano-Frankivsk. And I was pining for diversity, so I moved to Kiev. But for me, this confirmed my thought that you have to be very critical about your own culture.
Because it defines how we view ourselves, how we organize our activities, how we remember ourselves, and how we present ourselves for others. That's why, for me, it's important that cultural policies in Ukraine are in line with European values, the values of a free democratic society, and I try to implement it as I work in an independent sector. I try to design this independent infrastructure, and you might even memorize me as an actor of an independent sector. In my opinion, without an independent sector, it's impossible to say that our structure is European. So for me, values are not something written on paper, it's an everyday practice. And for instance, we might often be proud of the achievements inside the country, outside of the country, but for some reason this sector is quite invisible, and we've had several discussions about how to make projects and even without money. So those are people from the independent sector, those who think about projects without having money. And I keep working in this area because I have a certain values that correspond to my vision. And for me, European values that we've enumerated already have a very practical dimension. Like, for example, human dignity. There are many aspects of it, but if you graduate from autistic department, you most probably have to survive without funds, without regular salary. And so for me, it's also about dignity or freedom. Freedom can be an artistic freedom, but do we have freedom of choosing what cultural product to consume? Is it diverse enough? Is there a possibility to create diverse products? Or such a value as democracy. Democracy is about participation and influence. And for example, we do not have a register of non-governmental cultural organizations. When I think about impact, I can recall certain historical periods when people didn't have a passport, any ID document, and were not invited to vote. It's also about a democracy for me. So European values can be a threat for the systems which are afraid of complications, because they carry the idea of responsibility through hierarchy. I often faced certain well-established systems and their constraints. For example, my parents had certain the things that we rely on and that we survive with, and that we survive with. That's something we have to preserve in the context of such a prolonged crisis, because there is a risk of remaining in a paradigm where we seek simple answers. So values, it's complicated, but it's not a reason to refuse this complexity. So for me, the true threat is a centralized control over culture and destruction of horizontal ties. I try to present Ukrainian culture abroad, and many people say that we have to form a unique image of Ukrainian culture to convey it to the rest of the world. Don't you see there a risk of similarity with propaganda? In my opinion, self-presentation should not be similar to propaganda. Our strength is not in unification, but in pluralism. You might often get an impression that you are given a picture that does not provoke trust. So culture should remain space for diversity, and if we have this willingness of a unique picture, we should ask ourselves whether it's not about a willingness to have a centralized control. I try to respect the time limit.
Якщо раніше готова
If you are ready to wrap up earlier, then no. On the contrary, I should choose what to say next. For me, cultural infrastructure is important, the one which is not about buildings, but about a system allowing circulation of cultural products, and cultural policies should create an infrastructure which multiplies freedom and solidarity. I am a producer of performative arts, and there is a dozen, maybe 2 dozen of people like that in Ukraine, and it seems that this infrastructure doesn't really work. And most important for me is that our cultural infrastructure is not an invention. Absence of an independent sector was something that was used in the European Union to project an ideology, and we continue replicating this structure, and it provokes a lot of questions for me. Thank you. So, as you can see, those 4 presentations were done in Ukrainian language. At the same time, it seems to me that these were 4 different languages. And it seems to me that I live in a different country. Yeah, and we are now in different countries at the same time. I am a little bit biased because just last year I defended my thesis on dance arts, and I looked at this institutional aspect from a different angle, talking about principles of institutional policy that are not yet there. We've been discussing it, we've been agreeing on it, but we do not have it yet. So it seems to me that these 4 different languages we are speaking right now are a consequence. I am a representative of the beginning, but I didn't mention that I was the head of supervisory board of the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation, and I didn't do it for a reason. I wanted to sound as a professor of the university, as a researcher, and I was really interested in your views. Nothing personal, dear colleagues, all right? Most of the projects which are submitted to the Ukrainian Cultural Foundations, I'd like to recall you that my position of the head of the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation is a volunteer engagement. So most of the products that are submitted are the products from independent teams that are visible, that get state funding to carry out their projects. We have the House of Europe, Creative Europe, ISAR, Unity. We have a lot of foundations that allocate money for non-governmental initiatives. Why do you think that this independent sector is invisible? It's not only visible. After 2014, we've been having almost exclusively this independent activity. Culture has different facets, and there are numerous variants of this culture, and different actors of this process have to implement their policy. It just put me down that you do not see that, and you do not value that. The government is not perfect. I am not defending the government. I'm not a public official. If you are an independent artist and you want to get state support, it's very feasible. Yes, I guess we all know the size of the budget of the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation. It's good that you are working to increase it, but having only the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation is not enough for the independent sector. It is important, but it's not a cure-all. Second thing, I think that this sector, independent sector, is still invisible. Of course, we can do something, but we cannot participate in this competition with those who by default get state support. And I think we have mono culture because the current state policy supports this situation when we have monopolization. And I can rely on the feedback of a certain circle of people. It's not only my crazy thinking. So I'm just relaying their position. But it's part of this strategy for the development of the Cultural Foundation. Yes, and I'm happy that the new project supported by the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation also reflects this strategy. The term you used, the monoculture, well, you used the term polylog. Yes, I was speaking about polylog. So if we look at what we have on different stages of different theaters, this product is not diverse, and some observers say that it seems to them that they are in Moscow. What theaters are you? What theaters do you go to? We are at war, and these discussions are paid for with someone's life. We can allow ourselves to have this discussion. What performance reflects this position? In a lot of different performances. For example, opera theater in Lviv. Isn't it Ukrainian art? People are showing this in Lviv Opera. We are further and further away from our main topic about values. But you called us to have a discussion. I would like to set a different direction for our discussion. I will try to interpret your reaction, Olga. For example, Amsterdam. Amsterdam has 300 donors foundations. It's just an example, but if we talk about justice and autonomous practice, those initiatives grew from independent ones. So we can keep generating independent initiatives, and then we have to keep developing umbrella organizations which advocate for the rights of people with disabilities. Then different organizations caring for actors' needs and searching for the funds for actors. So those 300 foundations didn't appear upon the order from the top. So there are two sides here: autonomous acting and responsibility. But I would like to go back to the values, European values specifically. I fully support Natalia that Ukraine is part of Europe, and I am really triggered when people say let's go to Europe, meaning let's go abroad. That's a real trigger for me because it's about how people identify themselves.
Перед тим як збудувати діалог, тому що
And before we build a dialogue, I would like to get a reaction to certain elements of your speeches. It was really hard for me to compile all of that to have a single discussion. So I will ask the first question to every participant, and please be brief in your answers. The question came from Lyubov Morozova. We talked to her just yesterday, and I was telling her about this panel discussion, and she asked what European values exactly. So the question is, what European values are the main ones for you today? Just to have something to start with as we discuss the state of being threatened or being a threat, what values are you thinking about? Just briefly, be concise. Dignity, democracy, freedom.
Ну, я трошки випадаю з поля цього дискурсу, тому що
Well, I'm probably out of this discourse because for me, formal European values that exist on paper
що таке європейські цінності,
um,
що для мене
are not something reflected in practice. For me, European values are values of a German culture, French culture, Ukrainian culture. So, yeah, that's why I phrased it like that. What's your definition of European values we all refer to? Well, it's a universal structure which allows to
європейській геополітичній комунікації
have the all-European, pan-European communication to address joint geopolitical objectives.
да, Лісабонська угода їх формулювала.
Yes, this was formalized in Lisbon Agreement. Okay.
Ну, в мене є різні, звісно, варіанти відповіді на таке питання. Що
I have different ways of responding to this question. Of course, I listed some, but generally they are values that meet the concept of human rights, which is also a historic phenomenon. It's not universal for all times and people, and this was created fairly and adopted fairly recently. Now, if you simplify things, it's basically values of liberal social democracy. And the regime, the government that supports liberal social political paradigm where rights of individual and the way they are protected are the most important thing, and how individuals interact. In other words, human rights and the way they are protected, where in the center is the individual and their needs. Now let's quote, I'm quoting Natalia, rather Lisbon Agreement, but also Natalia, solidarity, democracy, human rights are going to be the drivers of development. Let's start with Mykola. Why not me? Because you've declared it, and I need a comment from Mykola and Olga. I agree that this could become the driver of development, but we need to understand what circles of society, what groups and individuals are going to group around this. Speaking of abstract values, I agree that It's a sort of a star, a guiding star, and in this case, vision is certainly a potential for development and how we're going to use it. But if we are moving toward dignity and freedom, yes, but the availability of vision is always better than lack of thereof.
Так перегукується з тим, що звучало раніше про практику.
This is echoes what was stated earlier.
Щоб це трошечки розвинути,
Now, to build on this, next quote from Mikola. Cultural practices are individual or collective acts comprised of element of individual or collective creative self-expression aimed at production or consumption of cultural products. Natalia, why values are developed in cultural practice? Abstract value is about specific things. Decent payment, salaries, clean toilet, the need to protect your motherland. I'm quoting these in a random way. Nothing pushes us toward this except self-realization. I cannot live. I'm torn within because we are humiliated, we are attacked. I want to live in my country, on my land, speak my own languages, and go to my church, synagogue, or temple. Because I believe that all development programs, from road building to healthcare, at the center, we should have dignity of individual, of a human being. So here I agree that cultural practice, this is rolling out these values. These are actions in line with this worldview. Well, I feel three values here: diversity,
саме за вашу реакцію, яку ви щойно озвучили, я чую принаймні розмаїття.
well, I can explain to you how you unlock all of them. To summarize what you said, based on cultural practices that you've just stated, going to a synagogue or a church, or choosing your own language, all this is based on freedom, democracy, solidarity, human rights, and the rule of law. They work in synergy.
Я ще раз прочитаю цю фразу.
Let me quote first, give you the quote, and then I will ask Denis to respond. Cultural practices are individual or collective acts that contain self-expression aimed at production of cultural or consumption of cultural products.
Ну, я тут, мабуть, відреагую на те, що де все це відбувається.
Well, first I'd like to respond to is where all this is happening. In an environment, in a system of senses that create these values in culture, and when they create it, it happens that created values, they tear up the culture because sometimes they are mutually exclusive. And cultural practices
Під час цього самовираження людей
during self-expression of artists,
цієї системи сенсів,
they create a certain load within the system of senses
ознаки певної деструкції,
that sometimes may seem destructive, but they're actually constructive when they create a sort of tension between these senses. They may seem acute, but we need this acuteness. And behind these words, we may have important and useful things in our society when we talk about development of culture. When during cities, on theater stages, where we have interesting artifacts that we cannot define. If they create in certain systems, and if they provoke us to some weird feelings and positions, it means there is cultural life here. And these cultural practices show that we have this tension, because then we have a repository of other ideas. Thank you for not responding to the word cultural product. Very quickly, sometimes I hear a criticism in product. Product is something that was produced, and it is always produced. Sometimes it's a very general word. It's where a human was involved, applying their work or efforts, etc. That's why I often use the word product. Well, we'll talk about this later. Two brief quotes from Denis, and I'd like to get your response from Olga first. The problem is not about whether European values are relevant to Ukraine, but it's more that they no longer ensure circulation of senses between cultures. Second, now we have a carnival of values. It's not a semantic game. It's an ability to differentiate between real and fake. I wrote the notes, and I made my conclusion that if you remove the word values or truths, I'm fine. It's just something that's Ukrainian. Therefore, I would have to dig deeper to understand this better. Well, we lost 150 years searching for this. Perhaps after values, we will find some other interesting construct. Thank you, Mykola. Well, first of all, by suggesting this discussion, this is a very relevant proposal. Mykola wrote 3 interesting posts on Facebook. Here, however, and in many things I agree with Denis when he juxtaposes carnival of values. I believe the declaration of Euro integration, many people in Ukraine have shifted, and in fact, practically, they do not share European values. I see a threat there, and notwithstanding declaring that we share European values, I believe they are under threat in Ukraine, because to many of us, are felt or perceived as a threat. Before I pass on to Natalia and comment these two quotes, I'd like to remind you of a roundtable discussion that we had jointly in Ukrainian House called Reform or Imitation.
З поправкою на це просто на що саме захочеться відреагувати? Я закинув це, але не обов'язково.
So, just respond to what you feel like responding.
Не знаю, як відповідати на
I'm not sure
фіксувати. Я надзвичайно поважаю
how to respond to this. I respect Denis.
Я не можу зрозуміти, де карнавал цінностей.
Where is the carnival of values? Dignity
Не десь там.
is not somewhere in Europe or in Ukraine. It is inside you. Each of us, you, Микола,
Не знаю, там пані Анастасія,
Anastasia,
хто завгодно. Ви себе
or
відчуваєте
anyone
людиною?
else.
Ви
Do you feel
відчуваєте
yourself
гідна людина?
a human
Ви
being?
приймаєте рішення в своєму житті?
Do you make decisions and act as,
Європейська вона чи українська,
with dignity?
чи четвертий спосіб, четверту чергу. Мені не вистачає термінології, не вистачає, коли є.
I'm
Поможіть.
grappling for words.
Ні, мені не вистачає термінології, таке буває. Вона не носить плащ європейський чи
It doesn't wear
українську
a
вишиванку.
European
Вона є її
garment or
всередині
Ukrainian
вас, ваше життя,
embroidered
діяльність,
national shirt.
визначений
It's within this the way of acting,
високим
the lifestyle.
цінності, як екзоскелет. Я хотіла
It's
сьогодні
like a
сказати, як
it's like a
визначає
skeleton,
людинку і як
like a
індивідуальність,
backbone that
як
forms
частини якихось
you as individuals as
as
well as communities.
Красиве слово карнавал цінностей не
Carnival of
карнавал
values.
чеснот. Ну от ви скажіть всім. Я зараз провокую, колеги, нічого персонального.
I don't want to provoke discussion. I understand. I would also leave this.
Не хочете говорити гідний, говоріть про себе. Я мужній.
If you don't want to say dignified, say I'm courageous, I'll get up, I'll do it.
Трансцендентальне лідерство є такий хороший.
Transcendental leadership
Я знайду для себе мотивацію
is another term.
робити щось, що не
I will
конкретно
find a
для мене
motivation
а для суспільства.
that is useful for you
Чому карнавал
and society.
Чому карнавал цінностей, але чесноти
Why?
так же в пух і прах зараз ваші чесноти можу розкатати. Дивіться, колеги, нічого персонального, так?
Nothing personal.
Ми, можливо, не на правильному шляху.
Or perhaps we're not on the right path.
Слово можу відповісти, може і наступного.
Спочатку ти. Я дуже коротко.
Let me say briefly what could be the problem, and it's not condemning,
Скажімо, певне знецінення,
but it's devaluing.
В чому проблема, наприклад, з гідністю?
Now, what the problem with dignity is, because Ukrainian society,
Для мене це множина різноманітних груп.
which is very diverse, comprised of various groups, due to various reasons, have fairly low level of tolerance. Therefore, to practice values for different actors of social interaction may be a problem because it may practically against their life interests.
Проблеми з толерацією,
If we have a problem with tolerance, including cultural practices,
відповідно, попри
then, despite declaration, the person
страх, принаймні,
may stifle
прийняти неналежним чином,
the fear to be perceived wrongly and have negative consequences.
Прекрасна дискусія.
Wonderful discussion.
Це ок.
Friends.
Нам трошечки, якщо все
Why don't you give us a round of applause?
собі, знаєте, розгорнулися, і нам тут цікаво.
Because we don't want to have fun without you enjoying this.
На маякніті.
Якщо репліка, коротко. Якщо репліка, бо у нас... Окей. Там просто є перекладачі, які не можуть не почути, що саме. От. Тут було. Так. Тут було репліка про те, що страх до того,
There was a
що
remark
українці
that
сприймають
there's a fear that Ukrainians do not perceive
є з Євросоюзу.
EU values.
Я думаю, що це не те, чого варто боятися.
I don't think it's something that we should be fearful. I think we look at the facts, and the fact is that real Ukrainian, real worker can't benefit from European values because we are in a situation where one can deceive each other, and instead of doing a good job, you go to an office, and then your European values will not put in a pocket.
Не працюєте на нормальній роботі, а? От мене,
Why don't you get a decent job?
Йдемо в практичну площину, так одразу.
Пані Наталя в аудиторіях працює, це нормальна робота, це не офісі.
Well, Natalia works
я в шоці.
in
Я
classrooms.
сиджу на одній сцені, я не знаю.
Who am I sharing the same stage with?
Я в офіс
I sometimes goes to the fields. I don't spend all my time in office.
Дякую за можливість це трошки перезавантажитись. Я, якщо відповідати на питання
Responding to your question, why we use the term carnival, where can you practice values?
є дуже тонка грань
There is a fine line
між нашим внутрішнім світом
between our
всередині і тим,
internal world and what we interact with in cultural domain.
того, що
And
називаємо культурою.
it depends on what we call culture.
Культурою називаємо
If we perceive culture as a communications environment, a process, and certain interactions,
сфери дозвілля або там
or
галузі.
leisure, or sector, or industry,
Більшість того,
you
що існує сьогоднішній дискурс цінностей,
you can then
делегати. Проблема починається
have a problem.
для мене найцікавіше починається тоді, коли
But the most interesting part
ми починаємо ставитися до культури як
is when we start to treat culture as a library of senses.
ми тоді розуміємо, що
Because then we understand that in this library of senses,
насправді дуже сильно конкурують одна з одною.
they compete with each other. They fight wars, they can destruct each other,
Кожної цінності
and each value
він дуже сильно відрізняється. І гідність
is very different. And dignity,
тут насправді не про оціночні якісь речі, вона дійсно носить вишиванку.
luckily or unluckily, is wearing a Ukrainian national costume. Because dignity in Germany or France is not the same thing. And there is no universal culture, although there is a meta system
Європейської культури з європейським
where there is no European culture with European values, but there is a discussion. And we often
це спростити це до рівня
are confused by these.
того, що є європейська культура.
We often state that there is this European culture, but it's a very primitive way of rendering it because Hungarian, German, French, or Slovak culture,
Величезна кількість різниць всередині.
they are very diverse.
Цього зовнішнього
And when we evaluate this external contour of values
того, чим я є як людина, як індивід, як
and comparing it to what I am as an individual, interacting with others, in this boundary we could say something
і це
but not
бачимо по політиці,
do it, and it's okay. We see it in politicians, in business environment, etc. But we can call these things as values.
про карнавал цінностей.
That's why I call this a carnival of values.
У цінностей є два виміри. Ми можемо цінності практикувати,
Values have two dimensions. We can declare and practice them. We can do the same with virtues. Can we declare something about virtues? Yes, we can.
це ніякого стосунку до вашої
Uh, no, it's not true. Your virtues cannot be reflected in your acts here and now. I can look at you, Miss Natalia, and say you are a very wise person. You mediate senses, and this conclusion will be something I can say in front of you and in a different place. But you can say things about yourself and then act on it or not. And for me, it's an incremental difference I can use to build the systems of senses. We can also talk about the monopoly on definitions. And instead of agreeing on definitions, because what you're doing right now is focusing on different aspects of the same terms. Yes, and we have to do that. I actually want to thank our participant for the comment because this attitude to the values, what will I have then? What will they give them? It's a matter of making a commodity out of values. And it is a threat for Ukraine, but it comes from our past, totalitarian regimes, etc., because showing your position and your values was dangerous for life. I'm not defending absence of any position, absence of declarations of your values, but I can understand that. So due to our past, I can understand that in a way. I'm just saying that to pass to a different topic. You just said that dignity in France, Germany, and Italy are different senses and cultures. I just want to continue with our final block. Yeah, if I may, just want to add 2 comments about the intervention from the audience. Why are values important for ordinary workers in offices or not? Why are values important? There is one simple reason. If there are certain practices circulating in our everyday environment and they correspond to certain values, in such conditions, it may help you to implement your life interests. If, for example, there is a value of honesty, transparency, inclusion, etc., for your office job or different kind of job, you will be honestly paid and transparently, and it will be in your life interests. So my dichotomy is interests and values, not values and virtues. So practicing certain values might lead to more conducive environment to self-realization. And about virtues, indeed, it is a very interesting conversation, but the virtues, as you see them, is something not traditional, like LGBT plus. It's a version of virtues, probably, but I'm thinking about it in a different angle. Virtues might mean an anti-Christian approach, because virtues are something which works when it is shown and practiced, like when someone does something courageous, it proves that they have courage. But the traditional approach is that the virtue is a consequence of a quality, and it might happen that the quality is there, but in some circumstances individuals behave differently. So when we only judge by social acts, it makes human being too social, and it decreases this individual dimension where there are certain qualities. Very briefly, I would like to replace the word virtuous by the word I think like for example my height is 195, but if I say that I'm 172, will it correspond to truth? So we need to have something to refer to. That's a profanation, dear colleague. Let's maybe get the questions from the audience.
Це було просто, щоб проявити цей момент імітації
Um,
практики, так,
I just wanted to
бо це не тільки в Україні відбувається.
refer to this topic of imitating something or practicing something. To wrap up, about the participation of a state or different states in circulation of senses in shaping the dialogue, one of the values of the European Union is cultural diversity. So I would like to quote Olha. She wrote the following: "International impact of Ukrainian culture is formed through horizontal ties between producers, agents, curators. Our strength is in independent acts and choice without waiting for an order from the top." Denise. In the context of being threatened or being a threat, I guess I already took too much attention. It's a chance to speak about values once again. Actually, we have to ask this question about being threatened or a threat in the context of the system. If we look at the culture and the system of values as a system, we understand that it has a purpose and objective out of the system. And so then we have to understand what is the objective, the purpose, and why there are threats to it. And then we come to a very uncomfortable term, which is development, because we might then say that the system has certain logic, and so certain elements allow the system to move towards the purpose. Then we might speak about presence or absence of a threat. And to work in this area, we have to understand what is the purpose, whether we move towards it, and what the threats are directed against. Miss Natalia, I've already lost the logic of conversation. Do not know about you, but I do not feel this discussion anymore. I do not see any threat. The values that we call European, let's say it this way: we are ancestors, we are actually those who carry the Adriatic culture. Asian civilizations have completely different values, and maybe it's my mistake, but when I speak about European values, I mean universal things that can be a driving force for Ukrainian society, which is European by its nature. These values, from my point of view, cannot be an obstacle for the development because there hasn't been sufficient development yet. We haven't built our society according to this cultural framework of values. One student of mine, a former political science student, currently a serviceman, once said European values were Ukrainian pixel. And that will be my last sentence today, if I may. So the fact that Europe called this development with force its value is something that we embody. We really live by these values, and we pay an incredible price, the price of lives of our citizens. Actually, you've answered my question. I just wanted to underline this disproportion between horizontal ties and dialogue between the states. Why it is a threat when in some cases institutions are part of the society, and the institutions form and shape different discourses at different levels. So in Ukraine we have a specific situation, and we are going back to the principles of cultural policy. So it's also about the public diplomacy, thanks to the curators. My point is, do we see a threat in this disbalance in contrast to other EU countries that we try to build dialogue with? I just want to add something else, and then we'll open the floor for the audience. So, a brief input. We've just come back from Berlin. We were attending a conference together with Maria there, and I just want to show that we really are on the same page with the European discourse. The whole conference was dedicated to Ukraine and the war unfolding in Ukraine as a space where we can reflect on important topics and questions. So, the main panel discussion was entitled Democracy in Europe, Diversity, Strength and Challenge. And we've mentioned it a lot of time today, diversity of cultures. They just emphasize different angle of it. So the conversation I participated in as a speaker together with Mikhailo Minakov, Valeria Koroblova, Robert Piaskovsky, with the moderation of Marianne Doring, and Jonathan Mills did the introduction. The topic was Art as a Bridge, how culture makes democracy tangible. So, again, there is this need within the European community, the European Union, to verbalize it somehow. So they have the virtues they have to live by, the guidelines, the policies, but they still need to verbalize how they practically see these values in their community and cooperation. We are participants and not the viewers and observers. Maybe we should proceed with the practice. All right. Then I would like to recommend, possibly. I just wanted to set the foundation of the discussion. But if you want, you'll be able to read it yourself. I just wanted to read a quotation of a book, and I wanted to get your feedback. The author is Pascal Guélen and Thijs Leister. And the main thing I wanted to underline here is that the current political crisis in Europe, as the financial crisis, are due to lack of knowledge of culture, and investments without cultural citizenship won't be any political support and policy for Europe. I just wanted to hear your reaction to this in the context of being threatened or a threat. But all right, let it be there. The floor is yours. No, unfortunately, we need to use microphones. Good evening. My name is Irina Shakhtoyeva. I create Ukrainian cultural product. I would like to underline that I am an IDP from Crimea. It's something private, but still I want to mention that we are in a state of war, and we have our own threats, but the main thing that can ensure our survival is unity. It's our unity, it's our value, and we need to practice it to fight in this war. I would like to quote Mr. Mikhailovsky, who said that actually our education has brought up the generation which went to fight for Ukraine, which is now currently defending our values.
However, I left everything and moved here to create Ukrainian language product, even though I am a Russian language, although my native is Russian. We have a huge huge chunk of culture which was created in the Russian language by patriots of Ukraine. We are rejecting this culture. Supposedly they are from Moscow, but this is something which was developed by Ukrainians, Olga Brachynska, for instance. But myself and my children grew up reading their books. So what do we do with this Russian culture, which is actually local and European? Who can respond? It's a very complex issue. There is no flow of distribution of senses within Ukraine. It hasn't been formed, and now civil society is trying to do this, but there is no cascade of distribution of senses. If we had it, we could then, through certain practices of social rethinking, etc., and integrate certain senses into our Ukrainian culture, under condition that these senses are within another country. Now, the senses that you are mentioning, the cultural products, are they within Ukrainian culture? Are they in senses of Ukrainian culture? How do we understand that? If they are within the context of the Russian culture, we want to integrate them, then we'll have to carry out a very complex work, and we're definitely not prepared for this. However, we need to do something about this in some foreseeable future and find approach to this. These are very complex issues, But without this, the formulation of this link and chain of distribution of senses, this is not feasible. And this is one of the attempts to create this chain. Whether it was successful or not is debatable, but this is my opinion. Just to add, I talked about this in research. The process of archiving, analyzing documentation, whether it's in Ukrainian or Russian, we never developed the infrastructure in order to deal with these senses. Try to recollect what was happening in the 90s, what happened in Odessa. So for me, on the day of the outbreak of the war, I felt like a bad student and that my life was in vain. Now we have so much to deal with, but for me it's about senses and infrastructure. I understand why to many Russian language is unacceptable. I have a clear example. At home I have several books which was published by Dukholiter, Serhiy Berentsev. They were translated into Ukrainian, and I doubt that Ukrainian translation, because it's Ukrainian language, carries different senses than a Russian original. Now, regarding your question, if we're talking about the context of my speech, I said consumption should be self-relevant, and under conditions of modern digitalized world, to some, through huge reasons, somebody wants to read Jadon, and someone in Ukraine will read Shchedrin. I never read Shchedrin, but someone finds it important, and under these conditions you won't do anything about this. There's a question. Yes, of course. Okay, but in that case, very quickly, because we're running out of time. Good evening. I'm Elena Yegorushkina. I have a question to the previous question. You were asking about practical side of things. We have a very good example when Russian singers translated their songs into Ukrainian, and nothing was lost. In practice, there are grants and funds. This is quite realistic to do. Of course, the quality of translation may be wanting, but that, of course, is the question to the translators. So my question is, why don't you simply take Russian-speaking content, Russian language content, and simply make a good quality translation? Just a translation, pure translation. If I understood this correctly, the stress was that the content is Ukrainian. It was created by Ukrainian patriots, people who
Дивіться, тут просто дуже
share Ukrainian messages.
тому що коли ми беремо щось і просто
See, what's important, if you just move something to a different location, its ontology doesn't change in terms of senses.
коли ми говоримо про культуру, ми говоримо про дуже складну систему.
When we talk about culture, it's a very complex system. When we talk about culture, values within the culture, all these links have to happen. If we translate, we need to first be sure we need this in our system of values, but still we need it so much that we need to translate it. Then we need to be sure that it needs to become part of a network and interact with others. Then it becomes part of our system of values. It's a large piece of work, so we need to understand whether you need it or not.
Хто наступний?
Здається, я займу чергу. У мене питання на
My
цю тему,
question
тему європейських цінностей якраз.
concerns European values.
В цьому контексті тут зібрались дієвці культури, так,
We have
культурного
representatives of the cultural sector here,
з того, що я спостерігаю,
and from what I'm observing, sometimes I see this value gap
пересічним українцям
between
і тим,
rank and file Ukrainian
є в нього,
and their values
тими цінностями,
and the values
переважно поділяють представники культурного сектору.
that
Тобто, наче культурний сектор значно
artists and workers of cultural sector
цю гідність про
share. They talk about dignity,
Лісабонській угоді,
Lisbon Agreement values, human rights,
часто, коли я
but often
їжджу
when I travel
часто їжджу потягом між різними містами,
on trains between different towns, and not just in the west or east,
блогерів в потязі
people
це не український сенс, це саме ось
talk about Russian bloggers, and they refer to Russian pop culture, and I see this huge cultural gap, a value gap between society and cultural workers and and artists. What can we do to bridge this gap?
бути привабливим. Проста відповідь.
To create attractive, simple answer. In order to to broadcast successfully, you have to make them attractive. There are no other ways. It shouldn't be a language of restriction. It should be creation of wonderful content and support everyone who makes this attractive.
Розвивати навичку участі,
Develop the skill of participants,
навичку участі,
of
дуже розвивала, що
participating,
контент,
which can affect the content in your community,
вибори. Думаю,
to choose. I think this is our role as people who work in culture. Let me provoke and understand for consequences.
Чому би не запропонувати
Why not
вибудовану успішну
offer
where
a system of propaganda?
Якщо ці люди не можуть визначити
If these people can't identify them, perhaps we should help them
вони ж
because they live in the country.
значить мають нести за це відповідальність.
Therefore, they should feel responsible.
Я б попередила про провокацію. Можливо, дивіться, всі так проти цієї пропаганди.
Everyone is against propaganda.
З неї косяться і
Everyone
кривляться.
is
Косяться і кривляться про пересічного
uh,
до речі.
smirking
Дивляться на те, що ми хочемо.
because they don't like it,
У нас дисонанс.
Я бачила,
but perhaps we need it. I saw how propaganda works in 2014.
Росію, але
No, I'm not
хочу
for Russia.
користуватися
I don't want to use the same.
не те, для чого я в цій країні.
В мене є коротенька
This is not why I'm here.
пропаганда на ваше питання.
A quick response to propaganda 2 days ago, I uploaded 65 pages of text on this. When we're ill and we have excessive weight or something, and you need an antibiotic to treat it, before you change your diet and change your lifestyle, first you have to get healthy. So government, the state needs to take steps in order to clean out integrated enemy sensors within our culture field. Then when we talk about development, we need diversity in order to speak many languages within, in order to be more competitive and diverse.
Але для мене, наприклад, що diversity,
For me,
якщо Служба безпеки України
diversity,
таки апелюючи до
for example, Security Service of Ukraine works.
якась думка, яка зманіпулюється. Тому що ми не були готові
We were not quite ready to work for our security in Crimea. Now we understand better what security is. Therefore, diversity and the construct of national security will make our propaganda successful. This is exactly what I meant.
Я просто хотів би сказати, що зараз і до
Just wanted to say that
решти країн Європи доходить, що
the rest of Europe also understand that the cultural framework
це була безпека.
is changing. During the conference, it was about culture. They talked about urbanization as a threat.
В принципі, в часи
But
війни і нападу
during the war
ситуація
and aggression,
вона має певні
work with culture
риси, певні характеристики, тому що
has a certain
час, коли просто все мирно, і ми собі
characteristics.
працюємо і так далі. У нас насправді ми виходимо з часу.
We are out of time.
Останнє
Про пропаганду, якщо даш,
Last question.
проблему, бо це важлива річ, я дуже швидко.
Important very quickly.
Насправді промоцію транзакцію артикуляцію сенсів
Promotion
необережно. Але якщо ж говорити про
and advertising senses.
то в чому
However, speaking of propaganda,
що, наприклад, я, якщо я пропагандист,
if I'm a propagandist,
це означає, що
it means that I take responsibility
формат дії
for format of action caused by my propaganda, and that means that I think I know better what Oля Terefeva needs to do. And I have great doubts because I sometimes know how to do myself, how to act, let alone Olga.
Так, одразу про пропаганду. Це не так працює в кожному творі
No,
пропаганда.
it doesn't work like that.
Гарного способу життя є
There's a propaganda of good lifestyle, sports,
в будь-якому творі.
in any
Ви вибирати
in any piece of writing. We just need to choose.
Далі. Питання про російську мову.
A question regarding Russian.
Група «Флюор»,
Great.
що знаходиться
There is a Fluor group
роблять свої пісні
that
російською
create their songs in
мовою.
Russian.
Вони просто
They didn't.
створили пісні.
There's,
Не бачу нічого
they didn't do anything bad. They
Мені
just
подобається
wrote
деякі
songs.
люди, які нею користуються. Далі, питання про книги.
Regarding
Все
books,
опирається в гроші.
It's all up to money. A publisher, who's going to buy it, and books translated into Ukrainian are cost twice as much as compared to original. And how are you going to sell that? Russian bloggers and telephone on their phone, it's not a problem. He can use anything he wants.
Так, так, так. Я просто швидко.
Це реакція чи запитання?
О, тепер моє питання, до якого
Now my question,
я говорив про офіс.
I talked about offices.
Більшості людей було смішно, Але
Most
деякі
people
мене
laughed,
зрозуміли.
but someone
Через те,
understood
що
me,
офіси я не мав на увазі
because
бухгалтерів.
I
Я не
didn't
мав на
mean
увазі людей,
accounting
що працюють в культурному
people
секторі,
or
чи ще
people who
серед
work in cultural
Я мав
sector.
на увазі шахраїв.
I meant
Що
frauds
я доходжу, дякую. От що отримують двічі більше зарплатню через те, що
who
вони
get
не платять податки.
double salary
І
because
це
they don't pay
просто
taxes.
показало, наскільки ви, ну от реально
It just showed
від людей, які
how far you are
звичайні
from
люди, які-
rank and file
звичайні
people.
Міша, який отримує 16
Misha, who gets 16,000 hryvnia.
Перепрошую,
Добре, ви завершили питання. Ви
Так
можете,
от,
вибачте,
прошу.
нам треба рухатись далі.
We need to move on.
Я бачу дуже часто те, що в культурному секторі показані твори, які не показують звичайних людей.
In many writings and books, real people are not simply depicted.
Дякуємо. Ви точно дуже
Thank
гарні
you.
думки про бухгалтерів.
От, але єдине скажу, що
You definitely respect the accountants.
прораховані слова. Ну, ми не можемо казати, що пропаганда
But
це
there are some,
слово.
we can't say that propaganda is a normal word.
Дуже мусить бігти, да.
Okay, Natalia needs to go.
Скажете якісь слово перед
I'd like to thank the audience. Thanks for being co-participants of this fairly complex discussion. Sorry, I've got to run.
Рід,
рід,
авторитет,
авторитет і сила. Так. І останнє запитання.
And the last question.
Пані Наталі.
My last question. When I chose to come here, I expected more discussion about threat of European values to us, because I have some experience of living in one European country, and I felt interesting tendency, a trend, where I see that European value is about equality and accessibility of everyone and for everyone, is a threat to itself, because in place of European values and those who produce them and popularize them, other values come, take their place, who are not familiar to Europeans. And many of those have been paid for by Russia. Nevertheless, how do we win this attention to us and our culture, not without clashing with European values, but there is a clash and competition for attention with, for instance, values who came to Europe from Middle East, for example.
Швидко просто реагую. Це дуже проста історія. Проблематична. Однією з
I will react very briefly. One of the European values is the value of freedom. When an individual or group of people abuse their freedom and harm themselves and others, does it mean that we have to deprive those people of their freedom? No. It can happen that the real implementation of that pool of European values will, after some time, lead to the disappearance of this civilization. And
Я сказав
So,
так, що, якщо можна, що
let it
нам
happen.
загрожує цінність,
I would put it that way. Tolerance, diversity, equality, and other values are not a threat for us. What is a threat is an unconscious attempt to implement different values without understanding whether it's ours or not. That's the key thing. Yes.
Це фінальна репліка від Ольги.
Thank you. And
Це вже
something
все, так?
from Olga? No, that's it from me. Then I will
Як бачите, дуже
uh,
така у нас вийшла
wrap
гаряча
up the
розмова.
discussion. We've had a
Але все ж таки вона
heated
була не
discussion,
про
but
загрозу і
it
про
was
загрозеність,
not about
вона більше була
threat
про,
or
для мене
the
вона була
state
більше
of being
про
threatened. Mostly for me, it was about
визначення, про спільну
the
мову, про діалог,
definitions,
про практику,
about
не практику, імітацію.
common
І,
language, about
все те,
dialogue,
що Денис
about
щойно проговорив,
practice or
ці
imitation,
моменти,
and
чи зовні
basically
ці, чи вони зсередини,
whether
чи такий
the
вектор взяв.
exterior values correspond to our internal sense and our perception of values. Are values something we might get or something we already have, or something we can create as we choose to be active citizens, disagree even. It's part of the agora, part of the political life. So I hope that this conversation will also be about the practice of European values. And let's thank our viewers and listeners with a round of applause. You're great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Можемо навіть зробити лівим плечем вперед. Опа. І такий. Я можу куди? Я тяну живіт. Так, давайте обіймемося, а то якось, наче загрожені.